Just trying to think my way into ideas to do with levels of description or levels of organisation, you know, in systems. You know, because I'm a system, aren't I? I've got this body, right? Here it is. And then I've got these organs inside my body, and and there's a level of description which applies to the organ, which doesn't apply to the whole system. Or something like a brain, particularly. You know, I've got this thing called a brain, and I've got this thing called consciousness. And, you know, I can talk about this experience I'm having now in terms of my consciousness within it, or I can talk about it in relation to the brain, or I can talk about it in relation to, you know, brain-environment relations, those kind of things. These different levels of description. But one of the things I think I tend to do is I tend to think about some of those levels having primacy, some of those levels coming first. You know what I mean? Even when I think of it in terms of an emergent property, I can't help having somewhere in that thought process the idea of primacy. That there's the brain, and then the brain produces consciousness. Do you know what I mean? Brain produces secondary, or the consciousness is emergent from the brain. Or back to the levels thing, you know, that the brain is at a certain level, and then consciousness is a higher order level of description, higher order, you know what I mean? Level of description. And presumably I could go to lower in the brain, you know, talk about the composition of neurons and neurotransmitters, those kind of things, or down, way down here, you know, to do with quarks and stuff there. But levels of description. And again, I think of those in terms of emergent properties. With one having primacy, almost as if the brain could exist in exactly the configuration it is for a moment, and then it produces this conscious experience thing. Do you know what I mean? But that's not how it works, is it? These things are coterminous. They come into being at the same time, and it's not that one emerges from the other. One, you know, they're necessary for sure, or at least I assume they're necessary. But it would be dualist to say that one emerges from the other, wouldn't it? Every much as it would be dualist to say that there's a ghost in the machine. It's just to do with levels of description. I suppose I'm just thinking it now in terms of kind of intervening in that process. Because if I want to make changes to consciousness, what do I do? Do I do it at the level? I could do it at the level of the brain, couldn't I? I could, you know, get a syringe and inject some chemical into my head. That would be fun, and that would change my consciousness for sure. You know, so you change the underlying. See, I can't do this underlying levels thing. You change the underlying substrate, and the emergent property or the next level of description up changes as a result. But the same can be true in reverse, can't it? You know. I mean, if you're listening to me right now, let's hope you are listening to me, hope there's somebody listening to me, then presumably that's going at the level of your consciousness. There's a conscious loop, isn't there, taking place between us here, through the media and voice and all that, and that will, I hope, at least have some kind of effect on your brain, even if it's just stimulating your auditory systems in there. So there is a kind of top-down effect as well. But this top-down, bottom-up thing, I mean, that's just a metaphor, isn't it? That's just a fundamentalist metaphor again, a foundationalist epistemological metaphor again. And of course, some people are. Yeah, dear, I don't want to go back into this again. Never mind. Some people are fundamentalists in the sense that they would say the brain has primacy, physical brain has primacy, and consciousness is a secondary effect, maybe even an epiphenomenon, a secondary effect, which you can almost dispense with. It's just an illusion produced by the brain. It's just something like that, whatever. And other people would probably do the reverse, wouldn't they? They'd say, I guess I'm thinking Deepak Chopra here. You would say the consciousness has primacy, and the brain is almost an effect. You know, there's this big global consciousness, this big mind of God thing, and out of that is what's that? Emanations. These emanations, physical emanations, as individual solid brains. You know what I mean? So it's a kind of top-down thinging into being of brains, as opposed to a bottom-up consciousnessing into being, or emergence of consciousness. But it seems to me they're both probably wrong. You know, they're both just artifacts of the foundationalist metaphor, and the idea that primacy or something like it has to take place somewhere in that system. There doesn't any need to be, is there really? These are just levels of description, and not one or t'other has any primacy, I don't think. You know, brain and mind, it's all the same. You know, it's one comes into being together, it seems to me. Down the lane, look.